Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back. Today I want to talk about binge-worthy television programs. And when I say binge-worthy, what I really mean are my favorite shows that I have personally taken the time to watch through in their entirety. There will not be any spoilers in this video beyond the most basic story elements from some of the shows I'm about to mention. So have no fears. There are no spoilers in this video. Since this channel is dedicated to filmmaker David Lynch and inspired by the triumphant return of Twin Peaks, it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone that this would be my top choice when it comes to binge watching. In fact, my first experience binge watching anything was back in college, long before the concept of binge watching had even gained mainstream recognition. Some college friends and I had the whole series on VHS, and we marathoned our way through it in just a few nights. Who killed Laura Palmer? That mystery, combined with quirky humor, intriguing characters, and terrific storytelling, made for a very enjoyable ride. It still ended on what was arguably the most frustrating cliffhanger in the history of television. By the time I watched Twin Peaks, it had already been canceled for a handful of years, but that did nothing to deter my desire to want more. In fact, quite the contrary, it created the improbable hope that Twin Peaks might someday return. This was back in 1997, and with each passing year, that hope turned into fantasy until the unthinkable happened. More than 25 years later, Twin Peaks was back, and it delivered. It was a powerhouse effort from David Lynch, who directed all 18 episodes of the new Twin Peaks, and he did so in tremendous style. David Chase described the new Twin Peaks as being, quote, greater than the original, and I find myself in complete agreement with him on that. And speaking of Chase, The Sopranos was the first show after Twin Peaks that I enjoyed on a level where I became heavily invested in the show. Being a New Jersey Italian, it sort of felt like mandatory viewing. But Sopranos was a revolutionary show that really helped set the standard for cable TV, which in turn helped pave the way to original content we now see from various streaming services, Netflix chief among them. And the reason Sopranos was revolutionary is because it was an absolutely awesome show. By this point in my life, I had a job in Manhattan, and every Monday, it was literally the talk of the office. It seemed as if everybody loved Sopranos, and not without good reason. It had tremendous characters, superb performances, and terrific storytelling. Watching New Jersey mob boss Tony Soprano trying to deal with all of his issues, both personal and professional, this was a real treat. Because James Gandolfini brought the character to life in such a real and relatable way. Tony Soprano was the ultimate anti-hero television character, and the show itself was quality from start to finish. Some people thought the later seasons became a little weaker as the show went along, but I didn't think that was the case at all. The Sopranos experience for me was enjoyable the whole way through, several times over, up to and including its final moments, which, I might be in the small minority here, but I thought the ending was terrific. Another one of my favorite shows to binge watch is Breaking Bad. It's the story of Walter White, a high school chemistry teacher diagnosed with lung cancer. In order to cope with this troubling news, Walt decides the best course of action is to pursue a career as a meth cook. Walt's desire to provide for his family is often at odds with his ambitions to grow his fledgling criminal enterprise. Breaking Bad had a really good story, a great cast, superb performances, but the thing that really made Breaking Bad a standout show for me was the heightened level of intensity it was consistently able to achieve. It truly seemed to get better and better as it went along, and it was captivating entertainment throughout. It's probably also worth mentioning the spin-off show, Better Call Saul, which serves mostly as a prequel to the events from Breaking Bad. Better Call Saul has greatly exceeded my very modest expectations going in. It's a very good show, but at the end of the day, I think it suffers from the inherent problems that came with the prequel territory. We already know the ultimate fate of the key players in the story, and because of that, Better Call Saul fails to reach the same heights of intensity. I personally wish they had more of a Godfather 2 type of thing going on, where you had two timelines at play, where revelations from the past were working in conjunction with the aftermath of the original. But if you liked Breaking Bad, you'll enjoy Better Call Saul. Just don't expect it to be Breaking Bad. So if Twin Peaks, The Sopranos, and Breaking Bad constitute my top tier of favorite TV shows, the next tier would include two programs: Mad Men and Person of Interest. Mad Men is a story that focuses on the life of Don Draper, a talented advertisement executive on Madison Avenue. It's a period piece primarily centered in New York City that covers the entirety of the 1960s. Think sort of like Forrest Gump in the sense that major events from that time are happening as all of the interesting characters from the show are living out their lives. Mad Men is extremely well done, with terrific production values, stellar attention to detail, and fascinating characters, most of which are terribly flawed and yet usually very likable. The entire cast is nothing short of tremendous, but Jon Hamm's portrayal of Don Draper is the life force of the series. Person of Interest is the story of Harold Finch and John Reese. Finch is an extremely wealthy computer programmer/hacker, and he develops an all-seeing super artificial intelligence known as the Machine. And Reese is a former CIA agent with impeccable combat skills. The machine built by Finch was designed to detect terrorist attacks before they happened, but the machine sees everything, including crimes involving ordinary people. So Finch recruits Reese as a sort of vigilante to help people in danger when the machine detects an immediate threat against someone. Person of Interest has some very clever storylines, and it does an excellent job combining thrilling action sequences with science fiction. And it's the type of sci-fi that seems abundantly plausible in the not-too-distant future. No binge-worthy TV show discussion is complete without at least mentioning Game of Thrones. I am not what you would describe as a huge Game of Thrones fan, but I've religiously watched it from the very beginning, and aside from what I thought was a dull second season, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I'm looking forward to watching the final episodes due out next year, and I may possibly do a preview prior to the airing of those episodes. Game of Thrones is a bit of a strange show in the sense that there isn't really a true antagonist in the story, but they still make it work. With so much moral ambiguity in Game of Thrones, it's one of the few series where I find myself constantly rooting for the most villainous characters at every turn. Unfortunately, most of my favorite characters from the show are long dead. Long live Queen Cersei. Dexter is a show about a serial killer who hunts down fellow serial killers. Dexter Morgan is a blood splatter analyst for the Miami PD, but he just so happens to be a highly trained killer with an incredible thirst for murdering murderers. Dexter was one of those shows that was so good when it was on its game, and then it crashed really hard when it passed its peak. Season 1 was okay, but then Season 2 was an absolute powerhouse. Seasons 3 and 4 were both excellent. Season 5 was back to okay, and then after that, it had completely lost everything that had made it a great show in the first place. The best part about Dexter during its peak is it achieved a level of intensity not unlike that which was frequently celebrated in Breaking Bad. But unlike Breaking Bad, Dexter was only able to maintain that level for a few seasons. The final season of Dexter was a tremendous disappointment. And it probably didn't help for me that these episodes corresponded with the final season of Breaking Bad. While Breaking Bad was reaching new heights to close out the show, Dexter was limping towards the finish line in unceremonious fashion. Bloodline is another show that when it was on, it was amazingly good. And when it fell off, it crashed hard and ugly. Bloodline is about the Rayburn family and their dirty little secret, and that winds up rearing its ugly head years later. The first season of Bloodline was nearly perfect. It was a captivating story that really drew you in with its clever execution and solid performances, particularly from Ben Mendelsohn. Season 2 was still very good, even if it lost a lot of the magic from the original season, and then something went terribly wrong in Season 3, where the story completely spiraled apart. If the first season wasn't so good, that last chapter could have ruined the entire series. But the first season really was something special. Lost is a series about the survivors of a plane crash, working together to try and survive on a deserted tropical island. Lost is a show that I found to be uneven, but not in the same way as Dexter or Bloodline. At its best, I don't think Lost was ever as good as those two shows were when they were at their best. But on the flip side, I don't think Lost was ever as bad as Dexter or Bloodline when those shows were at their worst. So in that sense, it was more consistent throughout its run. Lost did an interesting job taking the basic elements of a group survival story and combining those with the supernatural. While it did seem to me like they made things up as they went along, Lost is pretty entertaining the whole way through, and a solid cast made for likable characters. I thought Michael Emerson was one of the big standouts here, and he was also great in Person of Interest where he played computer expert Harold Finch. And at this point, I think I've gone far enough that as a self-respecting geek, I have to make mention of Buffy and Angel. I enjoyed both of these programs, although I probably tended to like Angel a bit more, as it tended to be a lot darker. Buffy had some pretty bad production values when it started, but that improved a great deal by season 2, and it continued improving throughout the show's run. Buffy and Angel were the type of shows where they had a main story arc, the big bad, but they'd often get away from it for long periods of time with a slew of standalone episodes. That can also be said for a lot of other fun shows like Bones, and Blue Bloods, and Fringe, and The Blacklist. And it can even be said for Person of Interest, although I believe that one was far better executed than the rest. So Buffy and Angel are shows I enjoyed, and Bones obviously. David Boreanaz is solid in both of those. And incidentally, am I the only one who remembers when he got his ass kicked by Al Bundy? I don't think of sitcoms as fitting under the scope of binge-worthy, so I'm not including comedies in this episode, but if I was, Married with Children would top that list, and would be closely followed by The Munsters. Sticking with the vampire theme, I also enjoyed True Blood. I thought that was pretty good, and it had some advantages over Buffy and Angel in the sense that it was on cable television. And some other HBO shows I've watched the whole way through that I thought were enjoyable include Boardwalk Empire and Deadwood. I'm also a big fan of Westworld, although I confess I haven't seen any of season 2 yet, and I need to binge watch my way through that and play some catch up. On Showtime, I really like Ray Donovan and Billions. Those are two programs I continue to follow that I think are both worth a watch. And as for some other Netflix original series, one I want to mention quickly here is The Killing. I enjoyed this show because at its most basic level, it seemed heavily inspired by Twin Peaks, even though the overall tone of the shows is completely different. But The Killing is a good murder mystery show, and I thought Mindhunter had a solid first season. I recently watched Safe, which has Michael C. Hall in it, Dexter. I think that one just came out, and that was a fun watch. Longmire is another one that's a fun watch. And Ozark was pretty decent. If comic book stories are your thing, Daredevil was pretty good. And Jessica Jones was even better. What I liked about Jessica Jones was that it was a comic book hero, but they played it like a straight detective story, and I thought that worked very well. The creators of the Batman movie should take note of the detective aspects of Jessica Jones, because the Batman creators never seem to quite get that right. Stranger Things is another Netflix show that's a lot of fun. The way that Stranger Things embraces so many aspects of the 1980s style is great in its own right, but it also has a quality story that also feels like it's straight out of the 80s. And on that note, for anyone who's seen my previous video, I really thought Cobra Kai was fantastic. That's another show that did a great job capturing that 80s vibe. And much to my surprise, I thought it was a terrific follow-up to the Karate Kid series. And what Cobra Kai is to the Karate Kid, Ash vs. Evil Dead is to the original Evil Dead. These are both shows that are great, in part, because they have a tremendous understanding of what they are, and they never try to be anything else. That's what makes Cobra Kai and Ash vs. the Evil Dead work so well. And watching Ash vs. Evil Dead, it's hard to believe that Bruce Campbell first played the role of Ash way back in 1981. That's just mind-boggling stuff, because he's so terrific in the capacity of an old Broken Down. Unfortunately, it appears Ash vs. Evil Dead has reached the end of the line. But if you enjoyed the Evil Dead movies, as I did, I can't imagine you wouldn't love Ash vs. Evil Dead. And winding down here, some other shows I enjoyed. The Following I thought was good, although I found it to be absolutely ridiculous. I thought Jericho was a very good show. If I remember correctly, that aired around the time of a writer's strike that kind of derailed it. And on that note, I thought Life was a terrific show. It kind of reminded me of Bones a little bit, except it had a better main storyline to go along with the standalone aspects of each episode. I thought that was very good. Rectify is another show I enjoyed. Very good drama and good storytelling elements to be found in that one. And finally, Sons of Anarchy. This was a show that had so much potential. The cast was terrific, the characters were interesting, and the basic premise seemed so good. But yet somehow, the stories never really worked for me. Katie Sagal, the actress best known for playing Peg Bundy, she's terrific in this. And beyond her, the best aspect of this show was that it took a page out of the Sopranos playbook in the sense that all of the characters were frequently overcome by spells of incompetence. So in conclusion, my absolute favorite shows are the ones I mentioned earlier in this video. Twin Peaks, The Sopranos, Breaking Bad, Mad Men, and Person of Interest. But all of the shows I mentioned here today, which beyond those top 5 were in no specific order, these are all series that, for one reason or another, for better or worse, I watched in their entirety. So these are shows I at least liked well enough to watch them the whole way through. Except for Westworld, which I do intend to catch up on soon. So what do you think of the shows I mentioned here today? And what are some of your favorite programs that I didn't mention? Please share your thoughts in the comments section. I am always up for some new recommendations, and in fact, I have quite a few shows that have been recommended to me that I haven't quite gotten around to watching yet, but I plan to. And I'm very curious to hear everyone's feedback. And as one final note, I would just like to say, I'm still itching for more Twin Peaks. I'm just itching for more. Thanks for watching, everyone, and have a wonderful night.